So, if you've never watched the documentary Tokyo Idols and the 1997 animated movie Perfect Blue back to back, you definitely should. And in this video, I'll tell you why. Hi, my name is Bia Barrett, and this is the first video in a series I want to call Double Feature. The idea of double feature is really old, but basically movie theaters would charge once for people to see a sequence of films. And my idea with this series is picking pairings of movies that talk to each other and that really enhance your experience of watching them. So now that I got the intro out of the way, let's talk about these movies. Perfect Blue is a 1997 psychological thriller directed by Satoshi Kon. It deals with Mima, a pop idol that wants to transition into an acting career. But in order to do that, she has to let go of a very pure and innocent image she built to be taken seriously. And let's just say that transition doesn't go over as smoothly as she hopes. She has to deal with disappointed fans, her own inner conflicts, and a loosening grip of reality. With only 80 minutes, this movie is really incredible. The editing is amazing, the transitions are beautiful, and it really is nothing short of a masterpiece. Released in 2017, some 20 years after Perfect Blue, Tokyo Idols is directed by Kyoko Miyake and is a documentary that explores idol culture and its ramifications in gender dynamics in Japan. Watching it is so enlightening to understand the kind of pressure that Mima is under and the context of idol culture. Really, you should watch it before you watch Perfect Blue if you can. When I first watched Perfect Blue, I was still a teenager, and even though the movie does show the crowd and the fans and gives some context of what Mima's life was as a pop idol, I didn't fully understand just how important innocence is in this subculture and in gender dynamics in Japan in general. The closest parallel I could draw would be with child stars like Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera trying to change that image into something more adult and resorting to sexualizing themselves. And although that is some of the story, and you can see some places poke fun at this, like in BoJack Horseman, where Sarah Lynn goes from child star to releasing a sexy pop song. P.S. If you haven't watched BoJack Horseman, you can do it, but I'm not gonna pay for the therapy you're gonna need afterwards, so your choice. Anyway, you do understand some of the pushback, but you don't get the full picture. And that's why I think watching Tokyo Idols could really enhance the whole Perfect Blue experience. Tokyo Idols is pretty clear from the first scene. We get a montage of the different crowds and a voiceover from a fan with the usual "this has saved my life" discourse, really heartwarming stuff, which I totally get because I'm also a huge fan of music and bands and have traveled to see them. But then you get other shots of crowds and you slowly realize, oh, everyone in the audience is a man. And most of them look over 30. And this sounds and looks like girly pop, but it really isn't for the girls. And then with zero subtlety, they cut to a montage of all these girl groups singing and dancing, and the song they're singing literally says, "I wish to remain as pure as the day I was born." The main character we follow in Tokyo Idols is Rio, a pop idol who's approaching her 21st birthday, just like Mima in Perfect Blue. Also similar to Mima, Rio is trying to make a transition from a pop idol, something she states she never really wanted to be, to what she considers a real singer. And idol culture, while really profitable, is still pretty niche, and her fans even comment about the fact that in the mainstream, nobody really knows who Rio is. So that's a concern. And as we come to learn very quickly in this documentary, being an idol comes with an expiry date, but I'll get into that later. In another parallel with Perfect Blue, Rio does daily live streams to connect with her audience. And while in Perfect Blue, the World Wide Web was just starting, we do get a daily blog about Mima's life. The documentary also presents us another important figure, Koji, who is a 43-year-old businessman, and he's one of Rio's biggest fans. And I know YouTube is sick of this discourse, but here's where we understand that this is about parasocial relationships and the blurring of these lines, because idols don't just make money out of the shows and the record sales. They really make money from meet and greets, events where fans can take pictures of them, with them, hold their hands, and talk to them for a minute. And Koji is very calmly going about how he's 43 years old, he has no relationships, he has no future plans or projects, he hasn't done anything interesting with his life, as he puts it. And really meeting Rio and getting into idol culture has become the center of his life. And since starting to really engage in that culture, he has spent the equivalent of buying an apartment money. It really speaks to a level of loneliness and a need for connection that is really heartbreaking. And Koji is still painted in a somewhat of a positive light. It's not that he's in love with Rio. He really admires her. He wants to be like her in the way that she chases her dreams. He says she's an inspiring person. And here we see a fan that's very supportive of her, even if her dreams involve not being an idol anymore. But then, as the documentary progresses, we see younger and younger groups with girls who are 14 or 10 years old, and fans are still mostly men who are old enough to be their fathers. And they all talk about how much money they spent on this. They seem to have no relationships, no interests, no time invested other than these shows and meet and greets. And it just gets weird because we have repeated scenes about how a lot of the appeal of these girl groups and idols is the fact that they're innocent and pure and not fully developed. And even Rio, who's approaching her 21st birthday, there's a scene where she talks about not being able to have a boyfriend. On the surface level, you could understand that, this idol career just takes up too much of her time and she's not able to have a social life. But then you get that underneath that, if part of the appeal of being an idol, and most of the appeal of being an idol, is about being pure, you can't get a boyfriend because that ruins the fantasy. By watching this documentary, you really understand why these fans who have put idols in a pedestal of shining perfection are so deeply affected by the change in Mima's image. You see, the conflict of the movie arises not just because she wants to change from idol to actress, but because of the type of role she's cast to play. She's sexualized, and that totally breaks the illusion of innocence. These fans have likely centered the pop idol in their lives, and so they feel like they have a say in her life. Mima is also in a catch-22. Her internal conflict is that there's no middle ground. She can either stay small in her idol role, or she can try to get success as an actress if she's willing to sexualize herself at the expense of her own boundaries. It really is either she's a virgin or a whore, and the movie really gets into the psychological impact of that, and fame and paranoia. But anyway, this is why I think that you should watch Tokyo Idols and Perfect Blue back to back. Do it and let me know what you think. Okay, so to make this video, I rewatched Tokyo Idols and Perfect Blue, and I couldn't help but remember other movies that connected and spoke to Perfect Blue, but this next section will have spoilers. So don't watch if you don't want spoilers for Perfect Blue, Black Swan, Nina Wu, and minor spoilers for Anti-porno. Now that we have this warning, if you're still watching, I guess you don't mind the spoilers. First, let's talk about the elephant in the room, Black Swan. Darren Aronofsky's 2010 film is heavily influenced by Perfect Blue, which he denies, And it's a super weird move considering he basically lifted an entire scene from Perfect Blue for his previous movie, Requiem for a Dream. So this segment is pretty much a list of similarities and also a rant about respect and disrespect. So in Black Swan, we follow Nina, which is just 2 letters away from Mima, an aspiring ballet dancer that is deemed too pure and innocent to play a more sexy part, which is the Black Swan. And then we follow her psychological decline. And yeah, there are a lot of similarities. So I think the main thing I wanted to talk about is not just Nina having a very similar name to Mima, or even direct scenes that are lifted, but a huge point of Black Swan is how Darren Aronofsky tries to engage the audience and confuse the audience, just as Nina becomes more confused within dreams, reality, and hallucinations. I think that this is less effective in Black Swan than in Perfect Blue, because in Perfect Blue there's another layer where Mima is an aspiring actress, so a lot of the scenes we see are recontextualized as we are shown that they're just scenes from the drama she's acting in and not scenes from her actual life and story that we're watching. And to have that other layer and these other possibilities of a fake out really add a lot to the movie and make it just so much more engaging, because you're constantly having to revisit and replace how you understood a previous scene. There are some scenes that are directly lifted, like the open arms tutu silhouette situation, the subway doppelganger reflection, and the room full of pictures that speak in the height of delusion in the characters. But there's also a lot of situations that are transferred into Black Swan. So Rumi, Mima's manager, is kind of split into 2 characters in Black Swan. In Perfect Blue, Rumi is kind of overprotective of Mima, and she's also a former idol. So that gets transformed into Beth, the former great dancer played by Winona Ryder, and also Nina's mom, who is very protective but overbearing. Other similarities include Rumi being run over and getting hurt, and Beth getting run over and getting hurt. Also, at the end of the movie, Mima stabs Rumi with a mirror, much in the same fashion that Nina stabs Mila Kunis's delusion herself with a mirror. There's also a struggle where she is choking the Mila Kunis's character, which is also her in the illusion. That is very similar to how Mima has a struggle with Rumi while having the delusion that is her alter ego. In both movies, we also get the scene with the crowd yelling Mima's name or Nina's name. So yeah, it's a lot. Black Swan, of course, is its own movie in its own right, and I think it deals a lot more with the theme of perfectionism that is not really present in Perfect Blue. But still, it is kind of weird to deny inspiration to this extent, especially considering how relatively unknown Perfect Blue was compared to Black Swan. I mean, Black Swan got nominated for 5 Oscars and Natalie Portman won. So, I don't know. To me, it just feels disrespectful. Anyway, this is the end of my Black Swan rant, and we're going into Nina Wu next. Nina Wu is a 2019 Taiwanese psychological thriller directed by Miri Zi and co-written by Wu Kexi, who plays the main character. Nina, again, the name so similar to Mima, is an aspiring actress who has only played small roles in commercials in the last 6 years, and she finally gets her big break, a role in a potentially award-winning movie, The only catch is there's full frontal nudity and some risque sex scenes. Sound familiar? To be totally fair, the actress who co-wrote the script did say that a lot of what goes into the movie has come from her own experience of being mistreated on set. The movie really focuses on these things that can happen on movie sets of not only verbal and mental abuse, but also going into sexual assault and physical abuse. And it really gathered a lot of attention because it was made and released right at the height of the Me Too movement. But while watching it, I got this weird feeling I was almost watching a Perfect Blue live action. Again, looking at different interviews, both the director and Woo Ki-shi, the actress, denied connections to Perfect Blue, with Midi even saying that he's never seen the movie. Just like in Perfect Blue, the main character experiences a mental health decline and a blurring of reality that is heightened by the fact that she's acting in the movie. So we, as an audience, are forced to reconsider scenes as they're revealed to be just part of a scene she's filming, or we have to understand whether these are dreams or delusions. It all gets really confusing for both Nina and the audience, just like it does in Perfect Blue. Other motifs and visual parallels pop up. The movie opens with a subway scene. We see Nina doing live streams to connect with her fans. There's also a use of red as a marker for trauma, and even a scene where Nina is nearly run over, which echoes back to Mima almost being run over in Perfect Blue. All of these make me really skeptical when people say that it wasn't an inspiration. But yeah, watch both movies and tell me what you think. Lastly, I wanted to talk about Sion Sono's Anti-porno, released in 2016. If you don't know Sion Sono's work, it's a lot. It's really intense and crazy and fun. There's a lightness in the way that he doesn't take himself too seriously. The best way I can put it is that he's a pervert, but he's very self-aware, and there is self-criticism in that. And at that level of honesty, it really makes all his movies really engaging because they deal a lot with contradiction. Anti-porno is a great example of this. So this company called Nikatsu wanted to revive a genre of movie that they made back in the 70s called roman porno, or romantic pornography. And Sion Sono was one of the directors they elected to make one of these projects. The only rules they gave him was that it needed to be shorter than 80 minutes and it had to have a sex scene every 10 minutes. And that's how he made Anti-porno. He did follow those rules. I don't really want to give much spoilers, but basically this movie also deals a lot with the concepts of the virgin versus whore, how Japan society really has this image of women being pure, but also hypersexualizes women from a young age. And it also has these fake out scenes that confuse both the main character and the audience. While visually Sion Sono does follow the rule of having nudity and sex scenes every 10 minutes, he also is simultaneously mocking the objectification of women in the dialogues and monologues that go throughout the movie. It's really a trip. There are also some visual parallels with Nina Wu, the 2019 movie I mentioned in the earlier segment, with some trapped lizards and women mimicking dogs. Out of all the movies I mentioned in this spoiler segment, I think that Anti-porno is the one that's doing its own thing the most, while still touching on the subjects that Tokyo Idols and Perfect Blue explore. So it's a short movie, it's just under 80 minutes. If you feel comfortable with a little bit of nudity and sex, maybe give it a go and let me know what you think. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe. This is the first one I'm making, so I hope there will be next ones, and I hope that this was entertaining for you somehow.